Hello.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning. All right, let's get started. So this week we had a DevoWorm meeting, and we had I think there was a cybernetics meeting that I didn't attend because I didn't realize it was happening. And we also had an admin meeting yesterday where we talked about our continuing work on getting things submitted to the Active Inference conference this year. So that's coming up in November. So that's what we did this week. Any updates?
When we did mention the Montreal AI Neuroscience conference that was this week. Certainly.
Oh, in person, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, that main conference, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I still hope that they'll put videos up later of everybody.
Yeah.
Or at least all the main talks. I thought it was interesting what they had as workshops for the. I think Friday was like tutorials day or something, but anyway, it looked like a bunch of scikit-learn tutorials, which I thought was.
Sorry, I was adjusting my setup, so I didn't really hear what was said or if people asked something or not.
Oh,
Sorry.
I just asked him for the link for the main conference, which he has now. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so I see the link here, Main 24. So this is the Main 2024 conference. This is a robot eating a donut. So it's topology. So yeah, the 7th edition. And that's the poster and the venue. It was in person. Keynote speakers, Terry Sojnowski, Luis Pessoa, Carlos Ponce, Donia Precup, Eva Dyer, Laura Driscoll. And then the day-by-day program is here. Of course, the speakers are here. You have the usual speakers, I guess, from Montreal area, Allen Institute, etc. So yeah, it looks pretty interesting. Let's look at the program here. So this was the Tuesday where they're talking about alignment, dynamical systems. I guess this is how we can teach humility to AI to make it safe. State-space dynamics in cortex and transformers. Panel discussion. And the evening, so Paul Cizik was some neuroscience foundations for AI. This talk here, 2 new perspectives on the structure-function relationship in neural networks. Luis Pessoa on the entangled brain. And let's see, Wednesday we had scaling up speech BCIs, the emergence of abstraction in minds and machines. Then Donia Precup on continual reinforcement learning. Comparative analysis of visual sensation and perception, visual representations in the human brain predicted by large language models. There's a really good stuff here. Thursday, foundation models for neuroscience, that's Patrick Manal. A common neural basis for behavior across individuals and species, that looks interesting. Blake Richards with a brain-like learning with exponentiated gradients. fast and slow learning in artificial and biological networks. And then the evening, multi-agent cooperation through learning-aware policy gradients, illuminating synaptic learning rules, credit assignment in neural networks without plasticity, and then they had a NeuroAI party. So this is the party here. Looks like that was the program. I didn't see tutorials, although it was probably in a different part of the website.
No, it was my bad. They called it educational.
Oh.
Check the main page.
Yeah, here it is.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah, I remember they did this before, where they had like educational.
No, it's totally. Yeah.
So this was the main educational, which I guess is before or after the main conference.
It said the 25th, right?
Yeah.
Where's the link to the Did they show you the things that they are doing?
Oh, let's see.
Somehow I got to another page.
The schedule here.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I guess this is it.
Yeah. You see?
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah.
That's not what I expected. I mean, like scikit-learn is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, let me not. I just thought thought everybody was focused on NeuroAI.
Well, scikit-learn, I mean, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the methods. I mean, I don't know how many quote-unquote NeuroAI methods are sort of, have their own toolbox, basically. I mean, I'm sure they do, but it's not as accessible. So
yeah, I thought it would be more like CNS.
Oh, well.
In trying to do some sort of.
Yeah, I think they've got this optimized down to like some, lessons that you can learn.
And I know that they've got a core group of researchers who certainly know it well, and
So yeah, this was yesterday.
That's again, it's great, and
yeah. So this was yesterday, and so in the morning they had the NeuroAI primers, which were these introduction to machine learning, where they had these different activities here. Introduction to supervised learning using scikit-learn, model selection and validation using scikit-learn. Then there was ML interfaces for neuroimaging. This one was machine learning and functional MRI using NiLearn. And then MNE, which is training machine learning models on MEG data using MNE, Python, and PyTorch. So that was, in the morning, there were two tracks there. You could take kind of the machine learning or the sort of neuro track. It wasn't, I guess they didn't integrate it in the morning. And then in the afternoon, you had the NeuroAI models. This is where you're kind of getting the keynotes. We have a keynote here. Experimentation on in silico neural responses. That's here, where in this session you will use a pre-trained encoding model from the neural encoding dataset, which is NED, to generate in silico functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, and encephalography EEG responses to images. We will then leverage the generated in silico neural responses for experimentation, specifically using relational neural control, or RNC. You will explore in silico fMRI responses for tens of thousands of naturalistic images to find controlling images that align or disentangle responses for different areas across visual cortex, thus isolating the shared and unique representational content. So this is this neural encoding dataset, which is on GitHub here. This is actually the NED toolbox. We have, so the dataset comes with pre-generated in silico fMRI and EEG responses for 150,000 naturalistic images coming from various sources here. which you can use for research purposes. So this is an interesting data set.
That does sound. I mean, it does sound interesting. It also sounds very. I mean, again, I'm just surprised that was the topic.
Why were you surprised by it?
I don't know. So one thing that I'm looking for is a workshop that I think might be. Well, I'll see if I can find a link. But certainly NIH November 12th, 13th.
Oh yeah,
is doing a NeuroAI workshop, and I just thought it was going to be more like that.
Okay.
Again, I don't know if my expectations should be entertained.
What's the content of that workshop?
Well, I think it's definitely going to be again more of this kind of does neuro. Well, I don't know. Let me see if I can find a program. But I think we kind of covered this in terms of talking about our own kind of NeuroAI channel.
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking about neuroscience informing AI, or are we talking about machine learning of neural data, which seems to be kind of what certainly the main educational day focused on.
Yeah, I think there's definitely. It's people are kind of they think of it in terms of the neuro and then the AI, and then they kind of bring them together in some way. And I would think, well, okay, it would be something like a neuro-inspired architecture or, some sort of thing like that. But a lot of times it's just kind of, there seems to be this, okay, it's logical to bring together data sets and build data-driven models and then see where that goes. I guess that's maybe one of the things we're kind of conceptually, maybe it's a little bit of a distinction there, but so
no, again, I don't know if my expectations should be entertained here.
I think
sense of
well,
I think it's not like I've got good neuro AI theories.
Well, I think it's just one of these fields where we don't know where it's going yet. So it's people can do what they know. They bring it to the table, and that's it. I mean, we have a lot of people trained across those domains. It's just kind of you notice with the talks, you had neuroscientists, you had machine learning people, and kind of some crossover, but it wasn't fundamentally integrated. Well, anyways, this is Ali Gifford or Alessandro Gifford. And they have the materials here, so you can actually just kind of walk through these tutorials. So you have the CoLab notebook and the GitHub repository. Oh, here's the RNC GitHub repository. So this is the relational neural control GitHub repository. It basically is this method for using deep neural networks to analyze data. So you have, this is the paper here, in silico discovery of representational relationships across visual cortex. Theoretical motivation, they talk about relational neural control. RNC generates and explores in silico functional magnetic resonance imaging responses for large amounts of images. It almost seems like what you're doing is you're kind of maybe generating, you're generating and exploring different responses for images, finding controlling images that align or disentangle responses across regions of interest. And, so it kind of is sort of an AI approach to dealing with finding maybe function in neural data. It's interesting. Okay, so let me go back to this. There's also understanding representational similarity analysis. This is Hamza Abdelhadi, and this is where they do this representational similarity analysis, where you're trying to link disparate types of data based on shared structures and their similarity or distance matrices. It is a powerful method for comparing and understanding neural representations across different conditions, modalities, or species. And so, again, this is another tutorial. And then there's brain decoding, where you're doing you're applying decoding models to fMRI data. And this is Pierre Herholtz and Pierre-Louis Barberant. Again, the tutorials are here, and you can follow along. Towards modeling high-level movement, Melanie Sagato, and this is where they have this. So I guess this is actually, this workshop introduces affordable, efficient strategies using video and pre-trained vision transformers as tools to gather contextually rich data sets and movement foundation models as a way to combine them into joint insights. So I'm not familiar with the movement foundation models they're using, but that'd be interesting to look into. While the workshop will focus on human movement, the concepts will be broadly applicable across domains and species. So this is actually the GitHub repository where they have advancing movement neuroscience with foundation models. So this is where we have, I don't know exactly, again, what they mean by foundation model. I guess this is where you're bringing together video and pre-trained vision transformers to gather contextually rich data sets, and then movement foundation models will combine them into joint insights. But we don't know how exactly, so I don't see that there's a paper in here. Yeah, so that's okay. But that's good. That's basically the education. The idea there is to give people some educational background into NeuroAI, and I know Morgan is kind of dissatisfied with things, but hey,
I didn't know I was going to be taking that position, or yeah. Again, I don't know what I thought I was going to see. I guess I like I said, it was going to be more like CNS.
Oh yeah, well,
like there was going to be more computational neuroscience, and yeah, but this is good, and let me. I hate losing things in this chat, but there's going to be a conference that's coming up. So cutting EEGx. I mean, Maine seems to have more fMRI.
Yeah.
But the good thing, well, can I just say I'm disappointed in Maine that it didn't have virtual.
Yeah, I am too. I think that would have been useful for a lot of people.
Mean, did we not learn anything from the pandemic?
Yeah, I know.
I don't understand these researchers who are like, I'm so glad we're getting back to the, in-person meetings.
Yeah.
That's, would it kill you to turn on a camera?
Yeah.
I don't understand. I'm not trying to take their in-person experience away from them.
Yeah.
Just want to be a fly on the wall.
Hey, yeah.
Cutting EEGx is virtual, is online.
Okay.
And anyway, I will check out the I'll check out more of the educational as Jesse said, are foundation models even enough anymore?
Yeah.
Haven't we moved on to frontier models?
Yeah, Jesse, there you go. There's your marketing hook.
Yeah. I like it.
That wasn't me. I'm trying to figure out who said that. I think it might have been Tim Brew that I was quoting, but yeah.
Yeah, but you have the Frontier map, so.
Right.
But it's kind of interesting, kind of funny that like the name, even just the naming of it, is so like. I remember someone asking, was it here or was it somewhere else? Someone was a very legitimate question asking like, well, what is a foundational model? And that was like a year or two ago.
Oh yeah.
And they were already asked that. Like it was like a very big like, what does it mean to be a foundational model? And then there's like all the institutes like Stanford's like all about foundational models, and now the HAI was like.
Yeah, well, this came up because I dropped the U Michigan foundational models workshop or something like that.
Right.
And it was funny because like just last night, it's like a Stanford biomedical imaging talk. And it's like foundation models for 3D medical imaging. And he starts out by like saying like, I guess I'm gonna have to start with what is even a foundational model, and has the term lost its meaning these days because everybody uses it.
What was the original term? So no one knows, but
yeah. I as much as well, so then I followed up because I was just like, so is somebody using the term frontier model? And he's just like, that's what NVIDIA used.
Well,
we're $1 trillion company, so we're even bigger. Yeah.
In a way that I don't really want to get into right now, it kind of raises an interesting point because I'm looking to do some things in sort of a meta science type space, but it's almost like it's not just like two things. One, not just pre-paradigmatic, but like pre-trend. Like the trend doesn't even take off fully. The trend doesn't get fully enough absorbed, and then for there to be momentum about the development of the term, and then it's sort of going away. But then also, like, are we like in a very sort of hand wavy way? Like, is this sort of indication that what the clearinghouse that makes a term popular is almost like how much of an influencer it is. Like, is it just really popular right now? Full stop. And does that make it the de facto term? It doesn't. The content doesn't matter. Just make sure you use the language that's getting at this thing that's current right now. Otherwise, people won't understand it. Like I don't know. I'm not saying it very well, but almost like the development of the concept is either completely detached from it, or just like it's sort of like hype consuming itself at the expense of is that more than the concept, which is nitpicky, but
scientists aren't immune to memes.
Yeah, they just don't want to admit it. Like you would put up a meme in a talk, but like meming yourself would not be acceptable.
Well, the foundation, like the word has become something that you have to use.
Right. Yeah,
even if you're not actually doing that.
And that's actually something I was thinking about literally this morning when I woke up, which is really unpleasant. This is not the things I want to think about when I wake up. It's literally this. It was that there was an event that I was invited to that I'm likely not going to go to for other reasons. there's an event that I was invited to, and there's a very big name speaker at the end of it. And I was thinking about this topic, like, oh, I like the speaker's work. I like what they're doing. And I thought, the only reason that I know about them at all is because of social media. And I was thinking, like, I kind of jokingly said it in the past, even like a year or two or 3 or 4 ago, here, this tension of not I don't know how to explain it, because it's sort of like, of course, as if you're doing the academia stuff, especially if you're trying to do like a tenure track, or really like your goal is to gain academic clout, then there's sort of obvious overlaps to social media related work, and like making things that are consumable for social media, basically to be an influencer. You're an influencer, but you're doing academic stuff. And it's sort of like, it's so interesting to see that conversation have changed, because for a while there was such a strong pushback of, oh, like, what do you do on Instagram? You should be in the lab, And now it's sort of like, whatever platform you care about, it's almost, I think it's kind of been flipped entirely to some extent, that you should, there's at least some kind of a pressure to put stuff in that space. And I guess what I was thinking about this morning is sort of like, how many things do I only know now through what to zoom out a bit further, like, how should one approach it? Even in thinking about like the open source, the research management stuff that we talked about recently, I'm thinking about, I'm not gonna talk about this there for the event, because I don't want to. Like, I don't really even want to be talking about it right now, but I feel like it's sort of on my mind and something to kind of sort through. But it's like, what do you do with that part of it? And there's many commentators on it, which I don't have to get into right now. But it's still the question of, like, I don't know. I'm still kind of absorbing the thing I keep mentioning from like, it was the first or second month of this year, where it's like, I was at a clinical AI event, and just talking about, like, we're dependent on preprints right now, and there's sort of this the speed of things makes it even more like, well, you better shift your pitch and your proposal and anything public facing to have that term in it. Otherwise, you might be behind. And so it's not just like a first mover bias. It's an I'm cool. I know the cool words bias too. If that makes sense.
Yeah. What term was that referring to?
I mean, I was talking about them at large as a class.
Oh, okay.
Like, it could be foundational models, could be anything. At the time, in the first event this year, it was, I don't know, basically about LLMs, as part of the LLM hype bubble, and from the conference, from that event that was talking about, like, from the same event, there was a very interesting conversation that was like, oh, we're doing this for, to save lives. Aren't we? Like, with that ultimate outcome, the return on investment here is saving more lives. And like, well, no, the return on investment here is making money too.
Saving lives. Get out of the way. Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of rambling over the place, but just sort of like, I was thinking this morning, and maybe I'm self-fulfilling prophecy bringing it up here again, but just like the weight of, there is now an aspect of, I don't even think it's science communication. I think it's something beyond communicating science to a public audience. It's this pressure, like this immense, and I think, honestly, it's specifically for younger generations that they feel an immense pressure to have a social media component to what they're doing. Even, I don't know. I don't know. I'll leave it at that. We can move on to other things now. I don't want to.
Oh,
I think I'm talking too long about this thing. But yeah.
Oh, I think that was a fine aside. I think that was an interesting. We should put a pin in that conversation because does speak a lot to like how people use language and how we get like things to study or why we study certain things. And I think with neuro AI, you kind of see where there's a bias towards like coming at it the way that you know how to come at a problem instead of kind of thinking about the broader synthesis. So I mean, that's something. So let me share my screen again. So yeah, we were talking about this cutting EEG conference. This is going to be online, I guess, this coming week. A lot of stuff here. Different types of neural modeling. EEG from the ear. Oscillations, are they real?
Brain life.
Yeah, brain waves.
Oh. Did we lose?
What are we? Did we lose what?
Hey, Jesse?
I see Jesse there.
I'm sorry, was that?
Are you still there? Yeah, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It looks like Morgan lost his connection.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Dual connection there.
Sorry, I lost you.
Okay. Yeah. Then there's what's it like to be a signal. 50 Shades of a PhD, which is just a career session. What neuroscience in the Anthropocene era. A queer look at science fiction, look at neuroscience. A queer and science fiction, look at neuroscience. AI guided data analysis, hyper hope. eWife accelerating scientific discovery. So this is publications. We trust publications that we cannot reproduce. This is all, I like that they have a lot of different types of sessions, society, publications, computational tools, goals, careers, and different like topics. So that's good.
Some pretty rocking people there. Jean-Remy King is now at Meta.
Okay.
There at the beginning. Yeah, it's pretty awesome to have Stefan Debner doing mobile brain imaging. Yeah, Andrew McGrath. Yeah, and they got like eLife and Brain Life. And open source neuroscience software. I wonder who that's.
Go down here, cycling on the freeway.
Yeah.
Very catchy titles in this.
Yeah. Anyway, they but this Benedict Enger, I think these are nice as complements to kind of what was covered in this educational
session.
Educational session or program. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's cutting EEGx. Then you had put another link in here on ROSCon.
Yeah, ROSCon. ROSCon happened. So, sorry, I should have checked that we could catch all the talks from that. I certainly hope so. We're lucky here in San Francisco. Basically the Gazebo team operate out of Bay Area, and Kirsten. Oh, I'm blanking on her last name. Anyway, I think she's the community manager for Gazebo. She also does events at Noisebridge, which is the hackerspace here. So, like, highly recommend their discourse discourse.ros.org or something like that.
Okay.
Anyway, her updates on Ross's the kind of Ross community discourse are great, and for not only covering what like features and kind of typical community manager stuff covering a software project, but that obviously this software touches a lot of research, touches a lot of research labs, right? So you also kind of indirectly get a lot of updates about people working on other things, and or the applications of that software, and so it's still great to cover. And then in Bradenberg vehicles, or what do we call that channel?
I guess Bradenberg
Yeah,
vehicles.
Bradenberg vehicles. Yeah, just
okay.
Russ Salakutdinov. If you don't know, he's Apple's chief scientist or chief ML AI scientist. Even though he's professor at Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's good stuff to see. I thought that the Apple paper that got it the lack of reasoning in LLMs was really interesting.
Oh yeah.
They dropped that in. I dropped that in math because I think they used math reasoning as their example.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
Anyway, just wanted that was another one of the big conferences that was happening kind of this past week. That yeah.
So ROSCon is what is ROSCon? What does ROS stand for?
Oh, robot operating system.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's good.
Right. So this is the probably the most widely used middleware for robotics.
Yeah.
And and is again a part of a lot of here's another buzzword. Don't want to trigger anybody. For digital twin stuff.
Oh yeah.
Certainly Human Brain Project started this with using ROS robots, real life ROS robots, but in simulations in Gazebo, right?
Yeah.
So that you could, like this was their attempt. Well, not just their attempt, but like it was a practical way of having the kind of best sim to real transfer, right?
Right.
So that you were actually using the same software that you were going to use in your real life robots. Yeah, and then this other talk was interesting. Or sorry, you're still looking at the Ross.
Okay.
Yeah, so I haven't gone through. There's only certain aspects. I mean, it's like it's robotics, right? So there's a lot of kind of very robotic specific topics here, but I think there's also just a lot of overlap in terms of agent planning and agent, right? So it's like, in fact, there's a lot of overlap between, say, ROSCon and like the Alberta plan for, I forget what they call it, for Alberta plan for AI or whatever they, I feel like that should say that the acronym should be AMY or something like that, but I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but You know what I'm talking about,
Right.
Yeah. And then one of the last videos that I dropped was someone talking about finite element modeling for soft robotics,
This one,
which is where it starts to get a little, So I guess YouTube, if the person's actually speaking, it doesn't pass on the metadata
like a
or
live
something.
stream, yeah.
But you know, one, I've just been covering a lot of finite element stuff or related stuff currently, but this is where robotics becomes more biological, or biologically relevant, right? Because this is, it's once you can deal with soft body simulations, it now gets very kind of biomimetic.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Soft robotics, opens up a lot of doors.
Yeah, and then you have that like real overlap with kind of animal movements kind of work and things like that, right?
Yeah. Back to ROSCon, so it's a lot of robotic stuff, like just stuff, various things. The tutorials talking about control, handheld mobile mapping systems, tool path planning, manipulation, manual manipulation in robots, birds of a feather networking sessions, and building robots with open source software.
That's her name. That's Catherine Scott there. Introduction to ROS and Building Robots.
Okay, from Intrinsic,
yeah. Sorry, I think I said Kristen. It's Catherine Scott.
Catherine Scott, Okay, yeah, that's good. That'll be it's interesting. Yeah. So I had another conference I wanted to talk about too. So it's like all these conferences happening, but they're all very good. Have a lot of interesting topics and a lot of things to kind of follow up on. So this one is COLLAs. And so this is the conference here. This is the third conference on lifelong learning agents. That was actually, I think, it was either Bradenburg Vehicles or in like Dev AI, somewhere like that.
Yeah, it's Bradenburg.
Okay, at Bradenburg. Okay, so this was in Italy. This was where they kind of did a lot of stuff on lifelong learning and continual learning. So this is where you have this field that includes like meta learning, multitask learning, transfer learning, curriculum learning, domain adaptation, few shot learning, out of distribution generalization, online and active learning, and open-ended learning. So it's like this whole collection of things, and people are trying to put these things into practice. So they had a couple of tracks here: conference, workshop, and journal tracks. Look at the conference track. All sorts of there's accepted papers here, oral presentations. You had memory head for pre-trained backbones and continual learning, subspace configurable networks, diffusion augmented agents, from categories to classifiers, name only continual learning by exploring the web. Chunking, continual learning is not just about distribution shift. Sub-goal distillation. Then we had some posters, priors for object-centric learning, masked autoencoders or efficient continual federated learners. So there's a lot of jargon in here, but just know that like in continual learning, there are a lot of things that sort of play into this aspect of learning like across domains, or learning as the agent behaves freely, or as it kind of goes across its lifespan, just kind of doing this sort of naturalistic behavior. Learning to learn without forgetting, using attention. On the limitation, experience replay for GNNs and continual learning. So this is replay of, I guess, experience and then graph neural networks. Let's see, prototype-based novel class discovery and detection. Maintaining plasticity and continual learning by regenerative regularization. Continual learning of diffusion models of generative distillation. Stable updated regression trees. Let's see. Yeah, all sorts of different topics. Here, rehearsal policies and rehearsal-free continual learning with pre-trained models. So there are all sorts of ways that people kind of approach these different problems. I also have so yeah, if you go here, I have a couple of screenshots that I took of the YouTube presence. So COLLAs is on YouTube, and they have their own channel. And there are a couple of main talks, keynote talks. This one was from Jay McClelland. This was efficient, cumulative, and continual learning in natural and artificial systems. This is where, again, where you have this cumulative learning across contexts, continual learning, and efficient learning. And this kind of talks also about natural systems of making that connection. This one was the theoretical advances in continual learning video from the YouTube channel, and this is phenomenology of catastrophic forgetting. So this is again, task similarity, task recurrence, and over-parameterization. It says chapter 2, which I'm assuming is maybe part of some way that they organize the conference. But yeah, it looks kind of interesting given what we're interested in here. This is the YouTube channel here where they have all sorts of talks from this year's conference, a deep dive into in-context learning, data heterogeneity analysis for out-of-distribution generalization, how to make machines that adapt quickly, reinforcement learning at the hyperscale. So there's a lot of stuff here that goes kind of beyond just the term continual learning. So I think lifelong learning agents, it's a pretty good conference. Again, it's in person in Italy, but they have things on YouTube here. And again, doing a pre-cup towards a general blueprint for continual reinforcement learning and how to make machines that adapt quickly. So that's kind of where they are with that. And it's very much, has this sort of A-life flavor, involves a lot of reinforcement learning, a lot of innovative reinforcement learning, and a lot of other topics that are really important for this. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just gonna say, hopefully Maine will drop videos in a couple days.
Okay. Is that promise or is that just?
I don't know. If not, then they need to be shamed.
Yeah.
Because again, like honestly, if you're putting together a conference that size, like you should be able to turn on a camera.
Yeah. Yeah, just turn a camera on.
And they did it for the lifelong learning, right?
Yeah.
Big names there.
Yeah. All right, so I think there was a lot of interesting stuff on these different conferences. And, I think there's a lot to follow up on, especially with respect to some of the stuff we're doing. We have our approach to NeuroAI. It's not really been, we've kind of described it in terms of developmental AI and some of these things. But I think definitely that, we could learn some things from the videos here. And like to see. Well, maybe we'll talk more about that in coming meetings.
Yeah, I saw. Is it Spelky?
Yeah, I think so. If you're
Spelky,
referring to
like she's one of the keynotes at NeuroPS.
okay.
Like, you know, I just I'm always glad, or you know, and like yeah, like that cognitive development is being considered in all of these, you know, AI conferences.
Yeah.
But I didn't see so much of that in the COLLA.
No, I didn't really see it. What else? Well, we didn't see. Well, we did see embodiment. I can't remember, but not really. I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by embodiment. It's just some sort of spatial cognition stuff. A lot of stuff talking about like out of distribution stuff, but not in an embodied context, which would be, you know, I don't know, like shifting bodies or shifting relations to the environment or whatever. Be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, this is where it like I do feel like, you know, you're seeing material. This is a nice example of seeing material kind of spread across 3 serious conferences.
Yeah.
You know, but that kind of actually needs to be put together, right?
Yeah.
It's, you know, because you got the robotics people who are, you know, the ones actually building stuff, right?
Yeah.
But you know, the yeah. So like you put all of those 3 together, and then you maybe get something that's more like bio AI.
Yeah, I think so. And so, like, you know, that would be like continual learning with the sort of connection to neuroscience data, with the connection to
Right.
robotics. Yeah.
Yeah, but like fully embodied.
Yeah.
You know, and again, like, you know, in kind of in some people's kind of neural theories, like where movement and things like that were like kind of, let's not say foundation models, but foundational domains where the nervous system learned to do things, and then other things got mapped to that. Or, you know, like again, like how hippocampal cognitive maps become utilized for other purposes.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to think about it. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if Jesse had anything to say about that, or.
I mean, I've brought updates that I can say about this week and the meeting we did have.
Yeah. So why don't we go move to that then? Okay, so go ahead.
Sure. I'll start with the meeting. We really it was sort of one of those it was a Thursday meeting, and it was following up on, I think, Robin's take on Bergson's like where is memory stored kind of stuff. I actually wasn't. Apologies for you not being there. I was in commute when it started, so I didn't get to record it. I didn't even know. I wasn't really sure who was going to be there for a little bit. But we kind of we got, I think, I don't know, somewhere around like page 18, 16, but like I think halfway through some of the paper in terms of its like actual content. We're before the alternatives part, but basically it was a nice discussion. I asked a lot of side questions about context for different people. Like I'm not super familiar with the debate. I guess I'll put it this way. There's a lot of dovetails into like consciousness and other things like that. And I guess the most professional and safest way for me to say it is like I'm pretty agnostic about a lot of it, and I don't have a lot of useful things to say. So I'm mostly trying to just listen and understand in that space. But I do like the approach of looking at it through the lens of memory and how memory works. And I think that's why we're doing the paper, but also like I think that's probably one of my preferred lenses of like looking at those spaces. So I mean, I feel Morgan can add in if he wants to say stuff, but I'll just say yeah, Amanda basically shared the discussion, and one of the more interesting points was sort of what memory is distributed, kind of this Humpty Dumpty analogy of being able to put things back together again or not. I think Morgan did something kind of funny, like not just Humpty Dumpty being put back together, but like having burn damage and other things like that. And then also the concept of memory or perception as memory, and as once something is perceived, it's already in the state of being a memory. And what does that imply, and how is it done? I also mentioned, which I didn't really know how to relate to, but when I got back, I remember this thing I saw. I posted it. I think it's in Cognition Futures. And we did not talk about this. I just sort of awkwardly mentioned it. But I'm curious if you have any connections to it. But in the Cognition Futures bit channel, I posted something from Tom Prose, or I think it was from LinkedIn. And it was basically looking at the Hough and Mayne's book. And he said, it's fascinating indeed that the first step of sensing is to strip away the physical qualities of incoming causal chains in favor of making a pattern. And I'm trying to sort out if there's any ties between that and what we were just saying about memory and perception is memory. And there was also a lot of discussion about, like, obviously Gibson information, and instead of direct. And I said one of the discussions was like, oh, instead of direct perception, is it direct memory then? And what does that mean? And like stuff like that. I don't think we got to like the complete substance of what the author's point was yet. Yeah. Or maybe, I guess I don't know what the alternatives, if it's the author's presenting their own alternative or going to other alternatives that it could be. I don't know yet. We didn't really. That's where we stopped basically. So
okay, well, that's good.
Rapid overview.
Yeah, I saw that
Yeah,
quote.
it was good.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, just that it was. There's nice references in the paper. So it was nice to follow up on those and check the. I think they were drawing from this learning, Learn Mem conference 2018, and it looks like it's. I don't know if it's one of those conferences that's scheduled when it's scheduled, or if it's scheduled every 5 years. But there's a Learn Mem 2023 that was interesting to also follow up on, and yeah, like there'll be some other ones to there.
I gasped audibly, I think.
You did.
Because I once again was reminded of a conference that I love dearly that has not been regularly scheduled, at least for this year. And I'm hyping it up just for my own, fun. It's We Robot. So I looked at We Robot and I'm like, oh, We Robot 2025, does it exist yet? And it does. So I'm extremely enthused, as a completely unrelated topic, that We Robot will happen next year. I think it's gonna be in Canada. So all right, more about that later. I'm sorry, I was just I've been hoping for that for months, and so rough for me. Anyway, interesting paper. I'm looking forward to continue it there, and I like the sort of physical memory. I don't mean to interrupt. I think you were saying more things, Morgan. I'm sorry.
No. It's I was distracted during our meeting because I was taking my daughter to acrobatics. But it was nice to kind of cover some of that memory literature and see some talks from big names that I like the presentations that they give because they bring up the kind of, if you will, the kind of problematic evidence in terms of having a nice, having a theory that you can kind of state clearly, that you can. It's hard to have a theory that's easily stateable that can explain this great mass of phenomena.
Yeah.
And just how important it is to get into the kind of the particular phenomena of learning and memory. And like I said at the meeting, like that, Languages of the Brain, which is Brever's book, that is also referenced. He does a certain amount of I hope he likes the comparison. But like Dennis Noble, like he gathers evidence that doesn't fit well with existing theories and metaphors, if you will, and it definitely has some, because again, like this was his own kind of wet lab, his own experiments, if you will, that speak to kind of the distributed nature of memory, or the engram stuff. And again, it's just always fun when you get to meet somebody who's like, yeah, I was talking with Lashley. So, yeah, it's good. It's good to cover.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to talk more about that in future meetings, I guess. But yeah, I'm not like on the cutting edge of these sort of the problematic evidence. So, what's an example of that in learning and memory?
Well, again, this paper doesn't cover that, but this paper is very, very high level, like in its descriptions and things like that. But certainly the kinds of things that Carl, was, as a brain surgeon, was dealing with, again, like both people who had either they had accidents or they had tumors that needed to be removed and things like that, right? So, and it's just invariably, to get into the brain, you have to cause damage to the brain, right?
Yeah.
And so we also brought up McGilchrist, and I thought it was perhaps relevant, Mark Soames as well, just as in terms of people who had a lot of theories about the brain that I would say were kind of derived from these brain damage cases, right? So it was actually got to, I think maybe Mark Soames was recently on Machine Learning Street Talk. I'm trying to think why I got to see him speak recently, but he got into research because his brother had a fall as a kid, and he wanted to understand why after that fall his brother was never the same person.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's some of that, but then there's some of the how does function return. You talk about localization of function, and then you remove that localized area, right? And then some other part of the brain starts being active while you do that task, right? Would be kind of one of Carl's examples. Now, again, it's yeah. So I'm not doing it great justice, and but was recommending. I forget his. I don't want to do too much damage to his name, but sorry. Yeah, Sharon Ranganathan has the book. So he runs the Dynamic Memory Lab at Davis, and has a recent book, and is one of the speakers at LearnMem 2023. And again, like, probably would have some better examples, as well as just the diving into some of those say keynotes from LearnMem.
Yeah. So I think I get the idea. It's like a lot of learning and memory was built on like HM or other clinical populations where you have brain damage. You get this localization of function deficit, and then you study that. And then, it's like sometimes you recover things because the brain can use other places to do the same thing. And it's kind of confusing things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of that, right? I mean, HM would be maybe a better example of like the circuitry involved in memory.
Right.
And like disrupting that, like where he had short term but not long term, right?
Yeah.
Or like very short, but it was reset.
Yeah.
And but yeah, like there's a lot of different things. I mean, I even think about like the cerebellar work that you covered a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Right. Just like there's you only get data from the places that you're collecting it from.
Right.
And certainly, one of the things Carl would always say was just like, what have you guys learned from fMRI that we didn't figure out as brain surgeons in the 40s or 50s? and it's like, well, one, we don't have to cut the skull open, right? And two, and certainly with fMRI, so it's like you have this benefit that you sort of can have these virtual electrodes in all brain areas, right? So much of that cerebellar work was fMRI, right?
Yeah.
And again, and this is why kind of like the statistical analysis of that data has become its own I'm biased as being one of those trainees, but that's why it became its own area, because trying to pull out those statistical networks became a new way of doing kind of brain science.
Right.
And so you're already seeing kind of like so much more of that distributed architecture, right?
Yeah.
And I think we'll see that more and more in terms of the integration of kind of the rest, what are called the resting networks, but that are obviously very dynamic.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like there's this you'll start to see things that are much more like the Steve Brunton kind of analyses, where dynamical systems become an important component of your statistical modeling.
All right. Yeah. So I think I get the idea here. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Definitely, we kind of a lot of times we assume we know a lot about things, and it's just like kind of an artifact of what we've been able to collect. We talked about that with model organisms. You have model organisms where you understand things, but then it doesn't necessarily generalize across life. Or we have like medical models, sometimes very far removed, like say for example using C. elegans to understand human health, and there's some analogies there, but then sometimes they don't work very well in translation. So it's just kind of an artifact of what we can study, what data we can collect, and things like that. So yeah, very good set of conversations. I would like to talk about, let's see. Yeah, I'll get into this one. So this is a set of papers where talk about this idea of morphofunctionality and anatomy. And so I'm going to go through a couple papers here, and we'll talk about them and see where they kind of fit into things. This is a paper from Artificial Life Journal. And this is called Emotion as Morphofunctionality. Spanish authors from the Center for Automation and Robotics at the Technical University of Madrid. So, we'll go through the abstract. We'll see what they're getting at when they say emotion is morphofunctionality. So the abstract reads, we argue for a morphofunctional approach to emotion modeling that can also aid the design of adaptive embodied systems. So they're interested in emotion modeling, which is, being able to replicate emotions or to identify them. And then they argue for this morphofunctional approach. By morphofunctionality, we target the online change in both structure and function of a system. So this is where this continual change across like time, in both structure and function, and related to the notion of physiology and emotion in animals. Apart from the biological intuition that emotions serve the function of preparing the body. So this is like, where you go through emotions to do things. So it's like if, like a fight or flight response, for example, would be an emotional preparation, or, anxiety would be an emotional preparation or something like that. We investigate the control requirements that any morphofunctional autonomous system must face. We argue that changes in morphology modify the dynamics of the system, thus forming a variable structure system, or VSS. We introduce some of the techniques of control theory to deal with VSS and derive a twofold hypothesis. So this is where they're kind of using control theory to deal with this variable structure system. And then they have a twofold hypothesis. So the first one is the loose coupling between two control systems in charge of action and action readiness. So there's this control system for action, control system for action readiness. So you have to get ready for an action, and then you have the execution of the action itself. And there's this loose coupling. So readiness means that you get the state of the system ready for the actual action. So it could be like thinking about how, a homeostatic system might prepare for some behavior. It might, sort of prime the system for the behavior. Whereas if those conditions aren't met, if the system's out of homeostasis, then that action can't occur. Second, the formation of pattern meta-control. Emotional phenomena can be seen as emergent from this control setup. So this is, again, the formation of pattern meta-control, which they'll talk about in the paper. I think we had a comment in the chat.
It was unrelated, sorry. It was for later.
That's okay. We'll talk about it after. Okay. So this article deals with two research areas that have gained increasing relevance over the last decade. Morphological computation, which we've talked about, is like, when you have an embodied system and it maybe moves or it changes its shape or has a certain shape and it's doing something in behavior, you can characterize that as a computation. And emotional robotics, which of course is where, has links to affective computing and, robots expressing emotions. And so we just talked about how, we can have emotional states that set up other behaviors or prepare the body for other behaviors. So this is where this is kind of connecting. Both could be considered to belong to the wider paradigm of embodied robotics, yet they seem to have very few themes in common, and there has been practically no direct link between the findings and the methods in the two areas. Embodiment has become a central issue in robotics. Morphological computation refers to the information theoretical implications of embodiment. Okay, so this is measuring these embodied behaviors, embodied aspects of behavior. There is evidence that morphology structures information flows. So this is where they're making a statement about information flows being structured by the morphology. So if you have a spherical body or a spherical morphology, you're going to have a different type of informational flow available to you than if you have a square body or some asymmetric body. And so, we could argue like why we have asymmetric bodies. I mean, there's some organisms that are much more symmetrical than we are, and there are organisms that are less symmetrical than we are. And what is the informational consequence of that? And that largely has to do with behavior. So how is the organism acquiring information? You could even look at cells where you have this sort of, they have different morphologies and ask, why do they have different morphologies? Is it for, purposes of movement? Of course, there's, sort of a mechanical aspect to that, but there's also maybe an informational aspect. As a consequence, the morphology will allow us to reduce the complex task of emulating nonlinear computation to the much simpler task to adapt some linear parameters for an additional readout. That's citation 18, which is, let's see if I can get to this thing. This is this Hauser et al. Towards a theoretical foundation or morphological computation with compliant bodies. This is in biological cybernetics. Okay, so they're kind of going into this idea of morphofunctional machines or devices that can change their functionality not only by a change in neural control, but by modifying their morphology. So this is where we're not just, observing changes within the nervous system, but there's morphological change as well. So, maybe stiffening your body or relaxing your body. Those are things that can play a role in behavior just as much as neural control. Of course, there's a connection between neural control and body modification or morphological modification. So this is, but there are different levels. Morphofunctional designs may therefore be inspired by how emotion organizes adaptive responses in biological agents. In emotion theory, there's this idea that emotion is about action readiness. To go through an emotion is largely to experience a change in readiness induced by patterns of physiological activation. As Freeman argues, the behaviors that are directed through interactions with the world towards the future state of an organism predictively require adaptations of the body to support the intentional motor activity. Okay. So a morphofunctional machine thus needs to somehow predict future engagements with the world and control morphofunctional preparation to favor certain classes of behavior. So this is where you get this emergent aspect where emotions emerge from the control setup. And so emotion research is revolved around the tension between emotion and cognition, often seen as two competing behavioral routes. So this is where you get this rational set of cognitive processes, and then you have these other emotional processes which are less than optimal behavior generation mechanisms. This is kind of the classic idea in emotion research. We challenge this view and suggest a control challenge between bodily disposition and activity performance. So adaptive behavior is not just performing actions upon the environment, it also involves tuning the body so it is best prepared. And so these are forms of concurrent control, and when you integrate those, and depending on the degree to which you integrate those, it turns into this sort of strategy for a cognitive agent. So let's see if I can find some figures in here. Actually, they have a good table here. Function effects underlying the fight or flight response in animals. So this is where you have different physiological effects. They have a functional role. You have biological examples of this physiological effect. And then you have analogs in robots. So every physiological effect has a functional role. This is for the fight or flight response, your biological examples, and then robotic analogs. So this is like their dynamical systems approach. They make the point that different morphological configurations may give rise to different phase diagrams. So you have this phase diagram on the left, which is this, this kind of phase diagram here, and then the attractor diagram on the right. So there are different types of bifurcations and attractor basins and things that you can, gain from these different morphological configurations and, and its interaction with cognition. So this is where you have this combined set of state-space trajectories for a system with variable structure. For each operating region, the dynamics is defined by a different phase portrait. In this case, that is easily visualizable because of the existence of a simple switching surface. You get these sort of, I guess this would be considered the hybrid system where you have these emotions preparing the body for action. And so you have this sort of composite phase space where you have some sort of bifurcation and you have this switch surface where you see the outcome. This shows the transitions. You have this transition between the bifurcation state and the attractor, and so you have this reversible transition between two different morphological configurations, one representing the bifurcation, the other representing the attractor basin. So this is based on a finite state automaton with two states that correspond to two states of morphological configuration, each one characterized by a different dynamical behavior. Transitions imply a morphofunctional change and hence a behavioral change. So this is the tasks involved in controlling a car, so they kind of use the vehicle analogy. They have driver control, wheel directions, motor revolutions, and brakes. So the driver controls these mechanical features of the car that result in the behavior of the car changing. You have driver control. It goes to the different types of functional changes, or the mechanisms that cause functional changes. But also you can have this feedback for motor performance. You have things like gear changes, and then you have the current state, which is the current gear, and that feeds back to some of these functional aspects. So basically, if the driver is controlling the car, they're changing gears, they're in one, any one gear at any one time. Then they're sending these commands to sort of modify the behavior of the car, but the behavior of the car is dependent upon the current state of the gear. And so gear changes are feedback for motor performance. And this entire sort of state of the car feeds back to driver control, so the driver can change things if they see things are not under their control. So this is kind of showing me the link control systems here. You have a control system for sort of the morphology of the car, and then the brains of the car, which is the driver that's going to make these changes. And so this is this figure 5 is a block diagram of a morphofunctional robot controller. The control device, or CD, which is this area in gray in the middle, operates on a robot using several patterns of morphological configuration, which is A1 through AN, managed by a homeostatic switching element, HSE, which is on the left, and a morphofunctional controller, MC, which is down here. So you have this you have this function, you have this feedback function XT, and then it goes into this control device where you have the morphofunctional controller, the homeostatic switching element, and then you have these different morphological configurations. Homeostatic switching element switches to a different configuration as needed. Then this is the cognitive architecture representing the components required for the emergence of emotion and their reciprocal causal connection. So here you have a morphofunctional loop at the top, which includes morphofunctional control. You have this control system below, which is where you have cognitive control, homeostatic control mediated by arousal. You have the body dynamics. You have sensing and action flows. And you have this relationship in the body dynamics between morphological parameters and system variables. And taken together, the morphofunctional loop and the control state output a control state that is for the current time. So basically, you have this control element that feeds up into this morphofunctional loop that, so you have this sort of the brains of the system interacting with the morphology. And there are a number of feedback loops here, and it outputs a current state of the system. So remember I said that there were these coupled control systems. That's what they were getting at with that diagram. So that in their conclusion, they say, by looking at the phenomena of emotion, we can grasp the challenge of controlling activity and controlling morphofunctionality. Motor control produces different forms of movement towards executing goal-oriented actions, normally through a sequencing of patterns that use some form of feedback mechanisms for control. Morphofunctional control, a slower timescale process that has consequences for behavior over long periods of time, so like minutes in biological systems, provide the system with timely action readiness. So you have this motor control aspect where, we can move our arms to targets, and it's usually something that operates on the scale of seconds. And then you have this morphofunctional control, which is actually sort of something that might occur at the scale of minutes. So they break this down to 2 time scales, like sort of seconds and minutes. So motor control is tightly regulated in terms of a closed feedback loop. You have this imperative to match a goal or to execute goal-oriented actions, which are immediate and result in movements that are sometimes automatic. And morphofunctional control is different. It's a slower timescale process. It has this sort of these sort of mediates these phases of behavior, and that's where we have this distinction. Control strategies for variable structure systems support the hypothesis that emotions emerge as pattern-based mechanisms of system meta-control that select from a finite, evolutionarily selected set of control organizations. So now we're moving from this morphofunctional control to these control strategies that are these meta-control aspects of, say, motor control. So there's this motor control, which is, at one level morphofunctional control, and there's a system meta-control, which is basically there are different control organizations available to you, and you select from those. And I guess they're making the analogy between that and emotional states. Furthermore, action generation and preparation for action appear as two loosely coupled control tasks. So you're actually, generating actions through motor control, and you're preparing for actions through this morphofunctional control, or at least you're setting up the context for these actions. So that's where you're talking about the preparation. So if I'm behaving, like if I'm driving in a very distracted state, or I'm driving in a very angry state, or I'm driving in a neutral state, those are, those different emotional states will affect the motor control and the feedback loops in that set of actions during that emotional state. When I change my emotional state, it changes my motor control. It changes the sort of the system's meta control strategy that I'm using. And so that actually, they cited citation 40 for that. And this is this paper here, A Model of Emotion as Pattern Meta Control. This was actually at BICA 2011. So this is kind of one, I guess it's from their own work and their own sort of, their own kind of way of thinking about this. So that's that paper. I think that was a good paper for looking at kind of this idea of having multiple control systems that are sort of neural based, sort of, thinking across evolution and things like that. This is another paper bringing anatomical information into neuronal network models. So this is a number of authors here, Gulas, Hilgetag. They've done a lot of things with building connectomes that expand and things like that. So basically, they're interested in taking neuronal network models, bringing anatomical information into them, and then seeing what their utility is. So a lot of European collaborators in this paper. The abstract reads, for constructing neuronal network models, computational neuroscientists have access to wide-ranging anatomical data that nevertheless tend to cover only a fraction of the parameters to be determined. So, we have all sorts of connectomes. We have, complete connectomes of C. elegans. We have good, almost complete connectomes of fruit flies. We have, neuroimaging derived connectomes and so forth. And they give you anatomical data, meaning that they're not these layered networks, like we have with deep learning, or these randomized networks, or, like what we have in reservoir computing. They're actually like, there's a meaning to the anatomy, and there's a map from the anatomy to the function. So this, this is finding and interpreting the most relevant data, estimating missing values, and combining the data and estimates from various sources into a coherent whole is a daunting task. With this chapter, we aim to provide guidance to modelers by describing the main types of anatomical data that may be useful for informing neural network models. We further discuss aspects of the underlying experimental techniques relevant to the interpretation of the data, list particularly comprehensive data sets, and describe methods for filling in the gaps in the experimental data. Such methods of predictive connectomics estimate connectivity where the data are lacking based on statistical relationships with known quantities. So what they're trying to do in this chapter is kind of give an idea of how to fill in the gaps in these networks, trying to figure out kind of where, like maybe thinking about function and thinking about what these networks should look like as sort of at sort of a systems level. And so they have this method of predictive connectomics where you can take like a partial connectome and predict the rest of it. And this, of course, has consequences for understanding what a connectome actually does. And, it's sort of based on its anatomy and based on, I guess, some predicated on function as well. And so it is instructive, in certain cases necessary, to use organizational principles that link the plethora of data within a unifying framework where regularities of brain structure can be exploited to inform computational models. In addition, we touch on the most prominent features of brain organization that are likely to influence predicted neuronal network dynamics. So now we're getting into dynamics, not just structure, with a focus on mammalian cerebral cortex. Given the still existing need for modelers to navigate a complex data landscape full of holes and stumbling blocks, it is vital that the field of neuroanatomy is moving towards increasingly systematic data collection, representation, and publication. So this paper is about like sort of enabling neuroanatomical precision, I guess, or making it better. But this has a lot of implications for sort of thinking about, like connectomes and how they kind of are organized anatomically, their structure, and then also their function, what they do in behavior. So, yeah, that's that paper. And so I don't know if we had any thoughts at this point.
I really like the kind of the Bika stuff, or excuse me, the morphofunctional models in their their realism of the many systems that are at play.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we know why scientists need to fix down as much variability as possible to make good causal inferences or address questions of mechanism, but looking at some of their diagrams, it's just like we know that so many of our like mundane everyday actions are involving that kind of interplay.
Yeah.
My one, with many of these, the only thing I wish would accompany these are computational models.
Right. Yeah.
I think they would be useful. I think they would be, I didn't check about the Winter School of Cognitive Modeling. Do you remember that? There's an Indian school.
Oh yeah.
That does like a week of like ACTAR and similar kind of models. Yeah, like I wish we had more of those to play with in terms of looking at just dynamic models like that you could play with and see patterns changing with give people better intuitions about these things.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And then I couldn't find that Hilgetag paper. Which
the second one? So the second one was, this is from the archive, I think it's 2007, or no, 2020, sorry. The way their nomenclature here is weird, but it's from August 2020. So it's on the archive, but I don't know. It's bringing anatomical models into neuronal network models, or anatomical information into neuronal network models. And so this is just kind of like, again, using anatomy to infer, basically connectomes. So if we were to, bring together like kind of anatomy at the scale,
okay. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I've got it now.
Yeah. So if we were to bring anatomy together at the scale of like, neuronal systems, so it'd be like the central nervous system, maybe the peripheral nervous system, but then also the embodied system or the morphological system. I think it's a really interesting kind of way to view that as like, complementary or maybe dueling control systems. So, if I have a control system in the connectome that's driving some behavior, there's some circuit that like you've got inhibition and, activation and things like that going on. And then the body is sort of primed for something else, or the body is primed for the same thing. Then, we can actually represent that as two control systems that are kind of either integrated or not integrated. And it's kind of an interesting way to think about that coupling between the brain and the body, or maybe it isn't like that separate. Maybe because you do have neuronal control of the body. Sometimes the body, it's just shape constrains things. Sometimes you have local processing at the periphery, so it's not really part of that same network. So there are all these things that kind of come together. I think it's a fertile area, like to think about agents, like computational agents, robotic agents, and to think about how to really kind of build like long-term states, not just the states that we can produce. Like if we were to take a C. elegans movement circuit and produce like stereotypical movements, that's a kind of a simple control problem because, although we need the worm body there, we don't need the worm body. We can put that into a robot and kind of replicate that movement. But there's some, longer term states that you might be primed for that are important. So, there are different, in some, I guess, in some insects and some invertebrates, you have, bodily states that kind of constrain the behavior of the organism. And, there's a physiological connection with that goes beyond sort of the neural network output or the neural network output. So, yeah.
Yeah, just, I mean, I see now that this paper is more, it's really going, it's real review of anatomical modeling, and then giving examples of like multi-level hierarchical organization, or the relation to functional constraints on networks due to connectivity. I see.
Yeah, let's see if there are any good figures in here.
It's got some, yeah. I mean, it's and it's definitely an overview of a bunch of brain maps, brain map data sets, which is not surprising given the majority Ulick authorship. it's Aachen and Jülich, being like where eBrains is now based. I didn't see Allen's isn't on there, but like you said, like you got some other usual suspects of the kind of connectome, early connectome stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they do bring up cortical layers here, and layer specificity, and of course, we have, when we get information in cortex, it goes up and down these columns, and there are different aspects of different columns. But like the different layers do different things in the processing. You have this local variations in cytoarchitecture, and they refer to the Allen Brain Atlas here. Let's see.
Yeah, they got Allen Atlas, they got Genelia, they've got they've got all the big mapping centers.
Yeah. They reference the COCOMAC database, which is this I guess tract tracing database, or
yeah. And that was COCOMAC was a really early one.
Yeah.
Like and of course with Ralph Cotter, who passed too young. But I want to say Cotter did that with Hilgetag. Anyway, but COCOMAC was definitely an early. It was definitely one of those early databases trying to take all this non-human primate work and do the kind of data collection or collation properly.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. There's this tract tracing is really fun because you can see like sort of the way that I guess you could say information moves in the brain, although it's just basically activation, but still you get these kind of statements of connectivity. So you can say brain region A is strongly connected to area B, and then there are these anterior grade labeled cells that are found mainly in layers 2/3. So you can actually, kind of put in a tracer and it'll move to the place where, so you can actually put together different statements, and you can these relational statements. So, that's probably useful for understanding kind of, if we just had a correlational map, it wouldn't be as kind of a strong of a statement as to what's going on in the connectome. If we have these kind of, I don't want to say causal, but they're directional or relational things.
Yeah. I dropped a paper into Neuroscience Networks, generating brain-wide connectome using synthetic axonal morphologies.
Okay. Which channel was that?
This was Neuroscience Networks.
All right.
It's just October 23rd.
Yeah. So this is the brain-wide connectome using synthetic axonal morphologies. Oh yeah, I saw this paper. Actually, I was going to talk about this next.
Okay.
Yeah, I will now. Definitely.
We're synced. We're synced, bro.
No.
It was cool. I mean, let me also just say that I sent that to I sent that to Logan.
Okay.
And but I kind of forgot what I was going to ask. I mean, I was going to ask Logan to come talk.
Oh yeah.
Or Randall Cohen, I think. Okay. Is it Randall?
I think
something. So. And again, I'll drop a link. He's got a video. I think they recorded their journal club that they did a couple weeks ago. The carbon copies.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they went over the new Drosophila brain model. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that would be great to hear about.
Yeah, I'll drop a link, but the main thing being that Logan was super excited to see that paper, and and I think it's very relevant to his larger white paper with Randall. Yeah. So we should still do that with Logan.
Yeah, that'd be great, actually. So yeah, that's let's go over this paper. So this is generating.
And of course, this is got Blue Brain.
Yeah.
About Henry Mark. Yeah.
It's Henry Markram was Blue Brain, and so generating brain-wide connectome using synthetic axonal morphologies. This is from this year, so this is a brand new preprint on the bioRxiv. The abstract reads recent experimental advances, including electron microscopy reconstructions, have produced detailed connectivity data for local brain regions. So this is just kind of talking about what we've been able to collect, types of data we've been able to collect. On the other hand, for intra-regional connectivity, large-scale imaging techniques such as MRI are best suited to provide insights. So we have this sort of, these two scales, sort of local brain regions, detailed connectivity data, and then the intra-regional connectivity and these larger scale imaging techniques. Now we have two imaging modalities and we have two different ways of looking at the brain. So, the idea, I guess, would be to integrate these in some way. So, however, understanding the relationship between local and long-range connectivity is essential. Leveraging a novel data set of whole brain axonal reconstruction. So this is where we're looking at this detailed connectivity data at the for local regions. So we have the axonal reconstructions. But if we zoom out and we think about like these intra-regional connectivity needs, we need to have a whole brain axonal reconstruction data set, basically. And we need to use that to look at these kind of local local and regional relationships. So this is where they leverage this data set. They present a technique to predict whole brain connectivity at the single cell level by generating detailed whole brain axonal morphologies from sparse experimental data. So I guess they're doing this sort of prediction step to extrapolate from the data and get to this desired point. The computationally generated axons accurately reproduce the local and global morphological properties of experimental reconstructions. And so this is where you create these axons and you generate them in a simulation or in a predictive capacity. Furthermore, the computationally synthesized axons generate large-scale inter-regional connectivity, defining the projectome and the connectome of the brain. So the connectome are the connections between cells, at least nominally. I mean, we can define a connectome in different ways. We can define it as the connections between regions, the connections between cells, the connections between like populations of cells. And depending on how you can collect the data, it's basically a correlational network. And we talked about the tract tracing database. So you could put condition or relational statements on that. But then you also have the projectome. So regionally, where are regions projecting to? So again, it's like with tract tracing, you have this projection from one place to another. And so you can build this projectome, which is different than a connectome, which is where you have not like a correlational map, but like these relational maps where you go from one place to another. This involves axonal transmission from one place to another. And so what they're saying here is that they have defined a projectome and a connectome, and this allows for this in silico experimentation of large brain regions. So let me go to the full text here. So this is the introduction where they talk about computational simulation and synthesis of the brain. And this is essential for studying the structure and functional complexity of the brain. So we need to have these kind of simulation techniques in addition to data sets of different types. We need to have biophysically accurate models to simulate neural growth by incorporating the molecular mechanisms of neuronal development, though their computational intensity often limits scalability. We can also have phenomenological models based on mathematical principles or statistical sampling from morphological data sets. These provide more computationally efficient alternatives. So we can have different types of models to sort of model the brain and kind of get these computational insights. We can have these biophysically accurate models, which are very much, dealing with neurons and neural growth and like sort of these physiological processes and getting them as accurate as possible. But to do this for something like a human brain or even like a mammalian brain of any type, it's computationally untenable. So you can only do very short, small patches of that. For phenomenological models like mathematical principles or statistical sampling from data sets where you have like these connectomes that are basically correlational maps, you can do this, but they're more computationally efficient. However, those models frequently require manual adjustments and struggle to generalize across different data sets. So it's hard for me to like generalize from like a human connectome to a macaque connectome to maybe like a Drosophila connectome. Even though they're all connectomes, it's hard to say like what the sort of the insights are there. In 2022, they introduced a computationally efficient method for synthesizing biologically realistic dendritic morphologies. This is the citation 7, which is computational synthesis of cortical dendritic morphologies. Based on the topological morphology descriptor in 8 and 9. So in 8, this is a topological representation of branching neuronal morphologies, and 9 is objective morphological classification of neocortical pyramidal cells. So they've been working in this area where they're kind of looking at these dendritic morphologies, looking at these branching neuronal morphologies, and then this classification of pyramidal cells. I guess they're all using the same kind of method and trying to get at different granularities of dendritic morphologies. So a similar approach was employed to synthesize astrocytes within the complex neuroglia vasculature network. So this is where you have this neurons and glia and vasculature all kind of interacting, and they're trying to find the astrocytes or synthesize astrocytes in those models. However, the majority of models focus on dendritic synthesis and do not account for brain topology when generating morphologies. So this is where you're just looking at dendritic synthesis, but not the larger topology of the network. So they're trying to synthesize axonal trees, and there are a lot of limitations to this. A lot of times it's just a very complex network, and also you need to integrate these biophysical models with this sort of statistical models of connectivity. So unlike dendrites, which are generally restricted within a brain region, axons typically extend to specific brain regions. So axons, or these axon trees, are going to be much larger than the dendritic trees, so it's harder to model these effectively. And so this highlights the necessity of generating axons that are spatially embedded within the brain. And this is the paper here that they're referring to, Framework for Efficient Synthesis of Spatially Embedded Morphologies. Although there have been modeling efforts in areas such as axon guidance, trade-offs between material and conduction delay, and fiber arrangement, to date only the Roots model has tackled the challenge of synthesizing detailed axonal morphologies. So the Roots model is this paper Roots by Bingham et al., an algorithm to generate biologically realistic cortical axons and an application of electroceutical modeling. So this is like, sort of the attempt to do this. So basically this whole set of work is about modeling these kind of networks of connection, like not like the statistical maps, but just like the things that connect everything. So you have dendritic trees, axonal trees, and then getting this to be biologically realistic, basically taking what is a physiological feature, a physiological process, and scaling it up to the brain, to regional parts of the brain. So this is kind of where, can we do this for some sort of mammalian connectome? However, the axons generated by this latter model, which is the roots model, is restricted to the rat dentate gyrus, so it's a very small part of the rat brain and do not extend across brain regions, limiting their broader applicability to long-range axons. So they talk about like synthesizing these brain-wide long-range axons. It requires replicating the projection patterns and morphometric features of biological long-range axons, while also considering brain topology. In addition, biological data on these structures was historically limited to just a few dozen morphologies until we've been able to get some new types of imaging in place, and which has allowed us to reconstruct hundreds of different types of axons. Successfully synthesizing brain-wide axons allows for the creation of synthetic connections between cells across the brain, thereby progressing from the connectome, encoding connections between individual neurons, to the projectome, which is this paper, a null model of the mouse whole neocortical microconnectome, which encodes connections between regions. Once this connectivity is established, it becomes possible to expand local simulations to simulations of circuits involving multiple brain regions, getting closer to realistic full brain simulations. So their whole goal originally was to build these whole brain simulations. And, this has been like a long-term project for them. So they've really kind of worked on a lot of the components of this. And so I think they're, this is a good example of how they have been trying to approach this, kind of going from biophysical models to these connectome models to projectome models, and then using the tools and scaling between them to come up with these regional sort of models of connection.
They're playing to their strengths.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like, going to spend the rest of his career trying to justify the work he did in the last, as part of the Human Brain Project.
Yeah, well, I think that's good
it's
though.
good stuff.
Yeah.
It's really good stuff. And you see the Helgetag paper that you covered. You see, just the many scales at which people currently collect data, and how much. And when you think of, that's a nice overview, because it's like you got to understand that there are like hundreds, if not thousands, of people working at each of those scales.
Yeah.
Right. And working to make a database at that scale.
Yeah.
Or on the, using that particular technology.
Yeah.
And yet it doesn't bridge the MRI to single cell work. Excuse me.
Yeah.
That is so important. And anyway, so I will follow up with Logan, because I think his their white paper on whole brain emulation, like again, like I've only got a problem with the kind of like the end goal of that.
What's the end goal?
Well, the end goal is that somehow you get function from structure.
Okay.
With this, with it being tied up in this somewhat, I don't know what the right quixotic goal of AI safety alignment,
Right.
like yeah, I don't know if quixotic's the right word.
Right. I think it's like a little bit
I don't even think we should be dreaming about that. I'm not. I don't have the good literature reference.
Yeah.
For but anyway, the main thing being that I would love to talk more about how computational synthetic a synthetic program like macrums can potentially complement or if not like complete the kinds of data collection that Logan's talking about using cryo EM at scale in anger across organisms.
Yeah.
Where he's almost trying to capture all of he wants to capture kind of big brain detail. Again, big brain as a project,
right.
Big brain detail. In an organism in a reasonable time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it'd be a good conversation to have. I'm trying to remember what. Let me just see if I can.
I'm curious about this relationship between structure and function, and specifically, like, if anyone's done any work on like kind of figuring out like what are the kind of the origins of a connectome. So, for example, like if you were to build a simple connectome and you could like build something kind of at random, you can assemble like connections. What is that something that would yield simple functions? And then, I mean, we kind of know that, like, say, like the connections in a Bradenberg vehicle can do things. But, like, could you, like, have a set of experiments where you could put together random connections and thus the random structures, and then it yields functions? And then can we select on those functions to produce things that are kind of diverse and have some goal-directed aspect to them? I'm just curious about that. Like, I don't think anyone's done that kind of set of experiments.
The connection. Sorry, I'm just dropping in. I bet. Actually, I'm going to just check if I've dropped this in before. Oh, okay. I haven't. So I just dropped in a paper, Comparative Prospects of Imaging Methods for Whole Brain Mammalian Connectomics into Neuroscience Networks. Okay, and that's his paper with Randall and Todd Huffman.
Okay, yeah, this is okay, good.
I don't know who Todd is.
Yeah, I don't know.
But should be interesting. I'll get more. The one other thing I wanted to say was that is what was kind of the focus of Randall Cohen's journal club, the Carbon Copies Journal Club that they just did, which was this Drosophila. I forget if they were. Was it the shoe paper? Here, 1 second. I'll get the. Yeah. So here's the video. Which I will drop in as well.
Okay.
So connectome constrained networks, DNM of the fruit fly visual system.
Okay.
it's not the paper I'm thinking of. So I was thinking of the shoe, like shoe paper, SHIH, I believe. This one's, and again, just to make things easy, is, I'll just drop this in Slack that this is the paper that they're talking about.
Okay, this one here.
Right, the study demonstrates how, yeah.
Yeah, this
but,
is.
there's a, anyway, I'm trying to find another paper. I'll find it later.
Okay.
It just in terms of simulations, using Drosophila, So again, in my mind, there's a Phil Shoe paper. Maybe that's what it is. It's spelled SHIU. Anyway, he's got a cool paper where he's using all this Flywire AI data that's being collected, but then he uses that in a much more reduced fashion. So this is somewhat of a counter to, say, Macron stuff, right? Is Shu over at Berkeley with I want to say Kristen something. I don't know if I've got Kristen on the brain. I'm pretty sure it's the last author is Kristen something. Her lab, where they're one of these labs that's collecting, real, single cell kind of data. But he does this like spiking neural network model, abstracted from the Flywire data to get, I think it was like olfactory or something behavior out of the system, So,
okay.
And it was super computationally efficient. Like he did this on his laptop.
Okay.
Like there had been this Tokyo, Japanese supercomputing center model, University of Tokyo, where they'd done, a full cable model theory, like they'd taken the connectomics data and they'd made this totally biologically realistic, model. And they ran for, 300 hours or something like that, right? On like 6,000 processors, right? And he did the same thing on his laptop.
Yeah.
For, with this like really kind of very abstract, kind of model, but motivated by kind of, good neural network theory.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll try to find it. Yes.
Okay.
It's spelled with a U.
All right. Yeah. Did
and
you
her name
post
is
it?
Kristen Scott. Yes.
Oh, good.
Okay. I think that's. Yeah, I'll drop.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I will stave off dementia for one more. One more week.
So this is Drosophila computational brain model reveals sensory motor processing. Philip Shue and Kristen Scott.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
But it's it's interesting. And when I met you at this Foresight meeting, and I felt again, I was at this Foresight meeting saying like, we need to stop, like forget about this whole brain emulation work. You can't, if your goal is this AI safety, if your goal is like, we need, like a biological entity to be, to interface with the computer, start with just organoid intelligence. Like we can't even, we can't push any kind of computing work to biology at this point,
Yeah.
right? And so if your goal is to like upload consciousness, like you need to start with an organoid in a dish, right? Like, and that would make sense, mechanistically, right? But I asked Shu if he would be interested in anything like that, and he was just like, no, no, I don't. I don't think that's a good use of my time.
Yeah. Well.
So yeah. So
Okay. Well, that's great. Yeah. Thanks for that discussion, and we had a lot of papers in there that we kind of yeah. So I'll when I do the YouTube post, I'll put them in there and the citations.
Please do.
Yeah.
Yes. I like.
Yeah. So I had one more thing here. I think Jesse had to leave. He just a few other updates. He's going to talk about We Robot 2025. We may talk about that next week. And then there's a Fellowship for Mental Health Working Group and Society Ethics and Tech Progress. So yeah, he had some things in the Slack on that. And congratulations on the Mental Health Working Group. Looks like they're making some success and headway. And also, we're looking for sort of getting ready for New York Celebration of Women Computing in 2025, but also We Robot in 2025. So that more about that next week.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Talk to you next week. Bye.
Take care, brother.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.